D&D has some incredible multi-class combinations, such as the Sorcerer, builds capable of unleashing massive amounts of damage with crazy divine smites. But today we're not talking about those, no. Today we're looking at the dark side. Combinations so cursed, they make your table question your life choices.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
We're hunting for D&D's most tragic multi-class combinations, and trust me, it's worse than you think. Bonjour! On our quest to find the worst multi-class combination possible, we need to establish a few roles. We'll also look at the effectiveness of the build inside and outside of combat, but not at the roleplay potential, because that's more dependent on the player rather than the build itself. Finally, we're gonna use the latest rules for all the classes except for the Artificer, because this one is still in Unearthed Arcana as of making this video. We're gonna use the Tasha's rule for it instead. And that's important because the 2024 rules significantly changed the multi-class game, because now subclasses all begin at level 3, so no more one level deep for a subclass ability. Remember those Hexblade dips that made everyone and their grandmother a Warlock? Well, they're gone now. I mean, I guess now there's Pact of the Blade, which makes everyone and their grandfather a Warlock, so yeah. So, what are the metrics we will be looking at? First, ability scores. If you need more than 3 good scores for your multi-class to function, that's a red flag. Monks are known to be a pretty bad class because they need at least 3 scores. So imagine when you need 4 or 5. Second, synergy, or I should say anti-synergy, when your class abilities actively fight each other. The best example of that, and spoiler ahead, is the rage of a barbarian with the spells. Doesn't work. And third, action economy, because nothing says great build like having 17 different uses for your bonus action and a single bonus action to use each turn. So let's start at number 5 with the least bad of the worst multi-class, the Warlock Druid. On paper, it sounds cool. You're a druid who made a pact with an ancient being to be able to protect your forest. I like it. In practice, oh my god, it's bad. First, the spread of ability scores is atrocious. Your druid wants wisdom to do literally everything, from their wild shape to their spellcasting, and the warlock needs charisma to do the same thing but on their end of the class. But you also need dexterity and constitution if you don't want to get hit by everything or die in a single hit, so that means that you need 4 ability scores to be able to function. That's pretty bad. The 2024 rules actually kind of save us here, and is the reason why this is so low on the list, because now you get access to Primal Warden, which gives you access to medium armor, which means that even though you won't have a good dexterity, you'll still have decent AC with a shield, which is alright. But the real pain comes from how those classes want to use their resources. First, the spellcasting doesn't stack. For example, a druid cleric gets the same spellcasting progression as a full caster. The problem here is that warlock is pact magic, it's not spellcasting. 2 different things, meaning that your spell slots do not progress. And that's an issue, because you could argue, oh, but it's good to have an extra few first level spells. The problem is that on the druid spell list, it isn't. If you were a wizard multi-class, yes, it's great. You get access to shield, absorb elements, those are incredible spells, but on the druid, you basically have healing word, and that's it. So losing your spellcasting progression just to get a few extra healing words is not really worth it, especially considering that at 5th level, druids can now burn uses of their wild shape to recharge first level spell slots, so it really doesn't make any sense. Consider this, druid cleric is not considered a good multi-class, and yet they share the same spellcasting stat. You, on the other hand, are splitting your spellcasting stat, meaning that you'll have worse DCs in between your warlock and your druid, so that's an even worse deal, because you're slowing down your spell progression on both classes, and druids really want those high impact, high level spells as quickly as possible, and warlocks as well. But the spellcasting nightmare doesn't end here. Unlike a wizard or sorcerer, which has access to instantaneous, very destructive magic, druids are the full casters which specialize in concentration spells. And guess what other class also specializes in concentration spells, because they have very few spell slots? You guessed it, warlocks. So now you're competing on concentration for 2 spells with mediocre DCs. The subclasses don't help either. For example, Circle of the Moon really wants you to wild shape, whereas the warlock subclasses really want you to, well, not be a bear to be able to use their abilities. The warlock invocations are not exactly useful to you either. Because you have a bad constitution, you don't really want to be in melee, so Pact of the Blade is out of the game for you. Pact of the Tome is also kind of useless because you're a druid, so you already have cantrips and ritual magic, so you're left with Pact of the Tome. But that doesn't really work either, because you cannot sacrifice one of your attacks to make the the attack with the familiar when you're wild shaped, because you're using multi-attack, not the attack action. Yeah, it's a rule thing, but it doesn't work. So is there a build hidden in there somewhere? Yes, there is one build because of one spell which is completely broken called Conjure Minor Elemental. With that spell and some Eldritch Blast, you're gonna deal absolutely insane amounts of damage even though you have terrible stats. This spell's broken, it should be fixed, but beyond that, there is no build available. It's just bad, don't do it. Next up, at number 4, we have the Barbarian Wizard multi-class. This is quite an infamous one. Many people have tried it, and many people have failed, and there's a good reason as to why. Let me explain. First, the ability scores. You're gonna need some Constitution, Dexterity, and Strength for your Barbarian and your Unarmored Defense, and you're also gonna need some Intelligence for all your Wizard shenanigans, which means that you need 4 different ability scores, which is terrible. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. It gets so much worse. Your hit dice as a barbarian is a d12. That is a sign for you to go in melee and tank hits for your allies. Your hit dice as a wizard is a d6. That's a sign for you to get the fuck out of melee and let the barbarian tank hits for the wizard. So when you combine the two, you've effectively shrunk in half the amount of hit points total you should normally have. It's a terrible deal. But the real star of this disaster of a multi-class is in the barbarian's core ability, Rage, because it completely turns off the ability to cast spells and prevents you from concentrating on any spell. But wait, I hear you say, I'll just use my spells when I'm not in combat. Cool, except we're in D&D and combat happens. So it means that you're just not gonna use half of your multi-class during combat. So let's say you're level 4, you're gonna play as a level 2 character. That doesn't sound like a great plan, especially considering you just nuked your health. You're gonna be worse than a wizard at defending yourself from range because you're gonna have less spells, and you're gonna be way worse than a barbarian at tanking hits in melee, and you're not gonna deal that much damage with your melee attacks either because your ability scores are so spread. In addition, the 2024 rules make it so that there is no Blade Singer subclass, which means that the only sort of viable build that there was no longer exists, and even that one was not that great because you could do maybe 1 or 2 combats a day with your Blade Song and then you're out. I'll just cast buff spells before raging. Okay, congratulations, you've cast Mirror Image, and that's it, because all the other ones, including the extremely good ones like Haste, require concentration, so that's a no-go straight up. On top of that, let's say that you use your rage in combat. Congratulations, now you cannot use shield or absorb elements, some of the best defensive tools that wizard have at their disposal. I'll just use my spells outside of combat. Congratulations, you've made a character that is worse at utility than an actual wizard and worse in combat than an actual barbarian. I just won't use rage much. Congratulations, you've made a barbarian which cannot take a hit. You see where the issues keep piling up? So do yourself a favor and just ignore this multi-class. So now let's move on to number 3 for our worst multi-class combination possible. This one is actually a tie with number 2 because both of them are equally atrocious. So at number 3, we have the Paladin Ranger multi-class. This is literally the worst ability spread you can get with 2 classes, because your Paladin requires you to have Strength and Charisma to be able to multi-class out of it, and Ranger requires you to have Dexterity and Wisdom to multi-class out of it. And you also need some Constitution if you don't want to die in a single hit. So now you're rocking 5 different ability scores. That is insanely bad. That right there should be the nail in the coffin. Just don't do it. But if you're curious and you want to see how much of a disaster this is, let me entertain you. The spellcasting progression is bad. Not atrocious, but bad. Because of how multi-classing works, you get the spellcasting progression of a regular half-caster, but you only get the spell slots of your respective class. So for example, if you have 3 levels into Paladins and 2 levels into Ranger, you're a level 5 character, so you do get access to level 2 spell slots, but the spells you know only are first levels, because your respective classes didn't learn their second level spells yet. Make sense? So you can use those high-level spell slots to upcast your normal spells, but you don't have spells of that level. The reason people multi-class Paladin with spellcasters, such as the Sorcerer, is to get access to big-level spell slots to be able to unleash massive Divine Smites. But that doesn't work here, because you're multi-classing with a Ranger, so you actually have the normal spell progression of a normal Paladin. It's like mixing tea and coffee. You get the same amount of liquid at the end, but you'd probably have been better off just not mixing them at all. But what about Hunter's Mark, I hear you say? Isn't that worth multi-classing into Ranger for? No, it's not. Don't do it.
Get some help.
With the new rules, this spell is just not worth it. Hunter's Mark adds 1d6 to your damage every time you attack a creature, which sounds pretty good, but requires your concentration, lasts for an hour, and then you need to use your bonus action to move it from one creature to the next. Paladins get access to Divine Favor, a spell which is also a bonus action and adds only 1d4 instead of 1d6 to all of their attacks. Sounds pretty good, right? Yeah, but it only lasts for a minute. But here's the catch, and that's where they're literally shitting on the ranger's lunch. That spell doesn't require concentration, and also works much better for the Paladin because it doesn't require a bonus action to move it around. It's just always active. And guess what? You don't need to nuke your ability scores on multiclass to get access to the spell. And if that wasn't enough, with the 2024 rules, you really don't want to use your bonus action as a Paladin to move Hunter's Mark around because you want that bonus action to be able to use Divine Smite, which is much more powerful. Another problem is that your positioning is going to be all over the place. Paladins want to be in the thick of it, next to their allies, to use their aura of protection and give them some hefty bonuses and to be able to hold back the enemies. Rangers, on the other hand, tend to want to be more in mid-range to be able to dart in and out of combat and drop each now and then some crowd control. Very different playstyles, which make it so that you'll be fighting on where to put yourself on the battlefield. On top of that, there is the best ability in the game, the Paladin's Crown Jewel Aura of Protection. This comes online at 6th level. Many Paladins really think about this ability before multi-classing in and out. Sorcedan, which is considered one of the best multi-class out there, even they have to consider Aura of Protection in their multi-class. And you are shitting on it by destroying your charisma score, which means the bonus is going to be lower, delaying at what time you're going to be able to get access to it just to get Hunter's Mark. It's not a good deal. I just want to point out, this is the third one and it's already like atrocious as hell. I'm just getting a headache thinking about how bad this is. Anyway, moving on. The next one on our list, few people have done for a good reason. Artificer Monk. What the hell is this? This multi-class is not just bad. It's so awful that on the official D&D post on how to multi-class your Artificer, when it comes to the Monk section, the sentence is, and I quote, "Nothing. There is nothing there. Please just go to another section." When the official team tells you, for the love of God, please look away, you know you've really struck some gold. Let's start with the ability score spread. It's actually somewhat better than the previous entry, and one of the reasons why I was debating which one to put. This one only requires 4 ability scores. You'll need your basic monk abilities, being Wisdom, Dexterity, and Constitution, but you'll also need Intelligence for the Artificer, which is horrendous. But the real beauty of this disaster is how the abilities of each class are literally fighting each other. Monks have transcended beyond the need for material possessions. Artificer are literally the hoarder class. They want everything on them. You see how there's like a bit of a conflict right there? Let's start with martial arts and unarmored defense. Those are your core monk abilities, which requires you to not be wearing armor or using a shield. Alright, great start, especially considering that Artificer are all about infusing their items. 50% of the infusions that an Artificer gets access to are meant for armor or shields, which means that you cannot use them if you want to be able to use anything on the monk's ability. So you're cutting off 50% of the abilities of your Artificer from the get-go. Not a great start, especially considering that your intelligence score is going to be lower because, once again, you need 3 other ability scores just to function. You also nuke your spellcasting progression because you're multi-classing with Monk, which has no spells. You do get key points though. I mean, kinda, because at first level into Monk you get 0 key points, and at second level you get 2 of them, so you can patient defense twice, and then that's it. Sounds great. Monk is just not a class that wants to multi-class. And your DC is gonna be ass because you need both Wisdom and Intelligence. So whether it's Artificer side or Monk side, it's just gonna be terrible all around. In addition, none of the subclasses work either. Armorer, Artificer, just don't, because you need to wear armor for the subclass to work, so you can't use a monk with it. What about the artillerist? Well, monks need their bonus action to do basically all of their cool monk shit, and the artillerist needs their bonus action to be able to fire their turret, so that's a no-go either. Battlesmith gives you proficiency with martial weapons, which you can't use as a monk because you're gonna lose your martial arts, and it gives you a cool pet, which you need a bonus action to be able to command around, so you can't use your monk abilities either. Great. What about the alchemist? Well, that's the only one that kinda works, but not really, because the alchemist is the worst artificer subclass, and you're giving that with like one of the worst multi-class in the game. But if you want to die quickly, then I do suggest that multi-class. But the one I suggest even more is the next one on our list, because this one is by far the worst. It legit makes this one looks kinda decent in comparison. It's that bad. And I'm talking about Paladin Monk multi-class. You get the worst out of multi-classing Paladin and Ranger, or Monk and Artificer. It is horrible. Remember Remember how the Paladin Ranger needed 5 ability scores? Well, that one does as well. You'll need Constitution because you want to be able to survive a few hits, because the only thing that the Monk and the Paladin have in common is that they both want to be in melee. But you'll also need Charisma and Strength to be able to multi-class in and out of Paladin, and the Wisdom and Dexterity to be able to multi-class in and out of Monk. So unless you rolled like a god, this is just not happening. That's it. That's the multi-class. Just don't do it. What am I kidding? It gets so much worse. Remember how the Artificer and the Monk don't work together at all because the Artificer requires you to wear armor and the Monk requires you not to wear armor? You know what other class also wants armor? Paladins. That's right. Because Paladins are reliant on strength, they wear armor to be able to protect themselves and tank a few hits with high AC. That's not happening because you're a monk, so you cannot wear armor. Otherwise, as we discussed previously with the Artificer, all of your abilities turn off. You'd be using strength for your punches, and you don't need to multi-class into monk to do that. You can't even use the cool Paladin weapons, the greatsword or the glaive. They don't work at all because they're not martial weapons that the monk can use, and they just turn off your martial arts. The resource management is also the worst of both worlds because, like I said, Paladin needs spell slots to be able to apply divine smites consistently. And guess which class doesn't get access to spell slots? That's right, the monk. And monks need key points to be able to use their monk abilities consistently. And guess which class doesn't have access to key points? You guessed it, the Paladin. So you have two classes which have completely different progressions, which do literally nothing for one another except slow each other down. You're two crabs in a bucket trying to murder each other. Yes, unlike the Ranger Paladin multiclass, which at least had the decency of giving you a normal half-caster spell progression, here you don't even get that. You get a half-caster progression, which is horrendous, and you barely get any key points to compensate for it. It's just terrible all around. The only bright spot is that you can use Divine Smite with your punches, but with the new 2024 rules, Paladins can use Divine Smite with their punches anyway. So that's completely useless. Remember how I said that the Sorcerer is one of the best multiclass and even it considers Aura of Protection in its multiclass? Well, guess what? Here, you're slowing down the level at which you get Aura of Protection. You're lowering the power of Aura of Protection because you need 5 different ability scores, meaning that your Charisma is going to be pretty low, which means that you've basically nullified the cool Paladin abilities that everybody wants. High-level multiclassing also doesn't really work because both classes get extra attack at level 5, so that would just end up creating a dead level. With the 2024 rules, the action economy is just a complete train wreck because monks need their bonus action for every single monk thing, and paladins need their bonus action to be able to use Divine Smite or Compel Duel or other important paladin spells. So you have 17 different uses for your bonus action, but only 1 bonus action per turn. That's the problem when you combine Lawful Stupid with Stunningly Brave, you get Stunningly Stupid. That's what this multiclass is. Just don't do it. Now, with that being said, with some heavy DM intervention, it is a build that you can do. It's fairly complex, but doable. I'm currently playing a character with this multiclass because I'm a complete moron, and once I refine it, I might make a video about it. We'll see. Anyway, until then, la da vedere.